And you're on.
All right, live from Willowdale. Oh, we're not really from Willowdale anymore, but we love that title. So, still in the city of Toronto. So I was going to do a video tonight because we've done a couple, but tonight's video is about fraudulent politicians, and that's from Bernie Sanders to John Tory. Let's start with Bernie Sanders, the love of the left. Everybody loves him, in Canada and the United States. And I'm so tired of Bernie Sanders. And it was, I've said this in previous videos. He never, first of all, he's not even a Democrat. He's an independent. Why is he running for the Democratic nomination when he never supported the Democratic Party? It would be like me, who's been very critical of the NDP over many years. I have a right to run for the leadership. I would have a right to run for leadership of the NDP if it ever came available, because I spent 22 years working hard for the NDP until I got frustrated and I can't even think of the word anymore, my beginning of the English language, but disinterested and fed up. And I think it was with the NDP, of course, with me, was when Jack Layton brought Stephen Harper to power in 2006 or 2005, and then 2006 when Harper was elected. And that only happened because Jack Layton helped bring down the Paul Martin government in November of 2005. And then I got disillusioned is the word I was looking for. And then I just said, yeah, I'm done. I can't take it anymore. And then I left the NDP, but I gave them 20 years of hard sweat and labor. So I would actually have a right to run for the leadership of the NDP in the sense that I gave them 22 years of my life, or 20 odd years of my life, but on the other hand, a lot of Democrats say, come on, he spent 10 years dissing us and writing letters to the editor dissing the NDP. So he has no right. And I would agree with that, frankly. So I would have no right to run for leadership of the NDP or run for any NDP position because, frankly, I don't have any use for them anymore. Bernie Sanders has had no use of the Democratic Party, even though he caucuses with them in Congress. He's an independent from Vermont. He left the Democratic Party. He obviously had disagreements with them, which is fine. But now he runs for the Democratic, and he signed the papers and all that. But now he runs for the top job, to be the nominee for the Democratic Party for the presidency of the United States. And he's never really been criticized for that. Now I know Hillary Clinton's, they're starting to criticize him for that. Well, you've never really been a Democrat. Not in recent years. You're sitting as an independent and sit in the Senate. You're an independent senator. And I don't know why he hasn't been challenged on that. He's bringing a lot of new people into the Democratic fold. Some may stick, some may not. We'll see. But yeah, I agree with Brian Mulroney. Former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney said, "You dance with the people that brung you. You stick with the people that supported you. Loyalty is important." Hillary Clinton has raised millions and millions and millions of dollars for Democratic candidates, for governors, for congressional folks. She has done, her and Bill have done, Hillary's been in the Democratic Party for 4 decades. She has raised a lot of money for Democratic candidates. She's given her all for the Democratic Party. After the bitter primary contest with Barack Obama, when she threw it all in with Obama. She supported him. She went out for him. She raised money for him. She's given it all for the Democratic Party. So she has certainly a right to run for the nomination of the presidential nomination of the Democratic Party. I don't think Bernie Sanders does. I can't believe people haven't confronted him on this. Because I agree with Brian Mulroney. You dance with the people that brung you, and he certainly doesn't have his bona fides in the Democratic Party. And it's now coming out a bit, and she's challenging him a bit on this, but frankly, he deserves to be challenged on this. What gives you the right to run to be the Democratic nominee for the president of the United States when you really haven't supported the Democratic Party? Anyways, that's another thing. Okay, so that's one of my things, Bernie Sanders. The other thing is I think I think he's a fraud. I think a lot of things he says don't stand up. In an interview with the New York Daily News, he was talking about breaking apart the big banks. He had no facts, no substance. It was all rhetoric. His campaign is about rhetoric, and it does appeal, like Donald Trump. It does appeal to a lot of stupid people. He goes on and on about trade agreements, but he doesn't give you any substance, how they've affected the United States, how they've hurt the United States. You know, the United States has benefited from trade agreements. As I said in a previous video, they've benefited big time. And all the 20 agreements they've signed with different countries, the United States has benefited. The United States is a recent piece in the New York Times the other day was talking about the United States is adding thousands and thousands of factory jobs in the last number of years. The whole issue with China is now defunct because the China factor is gone. China, doesn't even factor into the equation of the U.S. economy anymore. China does produce cheap goods, and the U.S. economy has absorbed that. The China factor doesn't even exist anymore. So the Donald Trump, Bernie Sanders argument doesn't even. The China factor is irrelevant now in terms of the U.S. economy. So I don't get it. You know, as I said, it's in the old 60s Dragnet series, and just the facts, man, just the facts. Go with the facts. And Paul Krugman, and I will pick it up in today's Friday, New York Times, April 8, 2016. Paul Krugman, great, right? Nobel Prize winner for economics, as a column in the New York Times. He's a columnist for the New York Times, and he has a really good piece today. And he says, Sanders over the edge. And he's basically saying Sanders doesn't know what he's talking about. And Paul Krugman is left of center, okay? He's the kind of guy who would support a guy like Bernie Sanders. He says, no, he's over the edge. And he talks about when Bernie Sanders goes against, I've said this about when Bernie Sanders goes against Wall Street. He says, well, some of the banks that were responsible for the collapse, like Countrywide Financial, weren't even Wall Street banks, were small banks. It was small banks that helped create the crisis of 2007, 2008. Bernie Sanders doesn't know what he's talking about. Marsha, Wall Street, Wall Street, Wall Street. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And same with trade. He doesn't have any substance. I can't believe Hillary doesn't go after him on these things. You got to have some substance. Go after. Okay, what is it with these trade agreements you don't like? How have they not benefited the United States? NAFTA did benefit the United States. So, and Hillary's backtracked a bit on trade too, which I think is a bit hypocritical, and I would criticize her on that. I think we got to examine these trade agreements, TPP for certain, and I'm a big fan of protecting Canada's supply management, particularly in agriculture and stuff. But we need trade. Canada does. It's an exporting nation, and the U.S. does as well. So, anyway, we're going to go on about Bernie Sanders says a lot of things, and they're not examined. And I'm glad Paul Krugman had that piece in the New York Times today, because he would generally be a Bernie Sanders supporter. He's a left-of-center guy, and he's, what he says is true. And he won a Nobel Prize for economics. So, anyways, I think Bernie Sanders is a bit of a fraud, and I don't know why people support him. I know they're looking for fresh ideas, and everybody wants hope and change. But Barack Obama can tell you, you can have a lot of hope, but change is difficult. And Obama tried to bring in a more universal healthcare system in the United States, and look at the opposition. Look at the opposition he faced. He got Obamacare in. This major, major achievement, one of the great achievements in American history. And it's still not great, but it's better than what they've had. And the opposition he faces is intense.
Oh, shit. Sorry.
That's all right. Just a minor interruption there. And you can't even get anything done on gun control. The United States is a very conservative country, and it's hard to get things done. So when Bernie Sanders talks about free tuition for all, great idea. That's not going to happen. Universal health care like Canada, France, Britain, most of Europe has, it's not going to happen. Don't promise things you can't do. Okay? I'm a fan of incremental change. small changes, things you can actually do. So Hillary says, I'm going to improve on Obamacare. That's a good thing because it needs to be improved. Obviously, we need more gun control. And obviously, she's going to continue the executive actions that Obama mentioned about gun control, because that's obviously the Americans need gun control. So don't promise pie, hope, Obama promised hope and change. There was a lot of hope and there was some change. And certainly, on domestic policy, it was difficult. Foreign policy, opening to Cuba, opening to Iran, these are great things, absolutely great things. And they'll be followed through with, obviously, Hillary Clinton. And they would be followed through with Bernie Sanders, too. I would see that. Forget even about the Republicans. We won't even talk about them. But yeah, small change, incremental change, that's the only thing you can do. And you can just ask Bob Rae in 1990. Everyone expected the new revolution in Ontario when he came to power, and he could do very little. So, okay, that's moving on to another fraud and talking about small change. John Tory, the mayor of Toronto. I don't get why he's so popular, frankly. To me, he's just the guy who gets around. He's at every festival. He's at everything from the Greek National Day parade to everything. He's everywhere. He's photo op John, but photo op John. But I don't see a lot of change in the city of Toronto. The biggest file, transit, is still a joke. Okay, that's still a joke. Subway patrons are still delayed on a daily basis by single issues. We never get any answers when it's going to be solved, why it happens. It delays people. People get late for work, people miss their trains, people miss their planes because you can't even get to the airport because you never know if the subway is going to work or not. It's due to single issues. So under John Tory, we're approving, under his leadership, the city council's approved all sorts of new transit plans, expansion. Forget it. The system is a joke right now. We need to have incremental change, small change. I'm a big fan, as I said earlier, about small changes. Okay, get the single problem solved, spend the money, get it done. Forget about transit expansion. Just get the single problem solved on the subway. Spend the money doing that, and then everyone's lives will be a lot easier. And streetcars, why are they bottlenecked at intersections? Minor changes, so they have right-of-ways at intersections and stuff. If streetcars have right-of-ways at intersections, they can just go through. Would create, would be so much simpler. Simple things on transit you could do, incremental changes. But everyone's into big sexy, right? Subway expansion, transit expansion. But get the small things done first. John Tory's failed on that. John Tory loves to travel around the world on the taxpayers' dime. Now he's in San Francisco or Northern California. He goes everywhere on the taxpayers' dime, and frankly, it's a waste of money. So that, and I say this because, people have been reflecting on Rob Ford. And a lot of people said, oh, Rob, there was a piece in the Star early this week about how toxic Rob Ford is, and let's not forget it. Yeah, he was. He's a mean-spirited bully, and he had lots of negatives, obviously, and his problems were a distraction for the running of the business of the city. But, at least he was a penny pincher, and I don't think he was a fraud, frankly. John Tory got elected on a fraudulent campaign promise, Smart Track, which many now consider crack track, because it was basically never more than a pipe dream, right? And it was a fraudulent promise. He knew it wasn't. It was a joke. It was just a way to get elected, and people bought into it. But Smart Track or Silly Track or Stupidity Track, or what I like to call crack track, because it was, like I said, a pipe dream. Now it's been exposed for what it was. It was just a campaign promise. And, he was elected on a fraudulent promise. And he should be held accountable, but nobody seems to hold him accountable for this. So yeah, it's another fraudulent politician, and I'm getting tired of it. And same with Justin Bieber, Trudeau. At first I re-examined my dislike of him, and when he's elected, I thought, okay, he might do things, but now I just see this as a guy who loves the spotlight, like John Tory, loves to be in selfies and photo ops, and but I see just a lot of platitudes And I have to admit, the budget was a good budget. I'll give him credit for that. They're going into deficit and everything, but just he's a guy who seems to love the spotlight, and I don't. I have to admit, I'm getting a little tired of Justin Trudeau mania. Like it's a bit much, and he needs to stop going to the White House and stop hanging out with Barack Obama. He's concentrating on real problems of this country, and that's particularly problems in the oil patch, which I don't think he's paying enough attention to. So, because they are suffering out there, and he needs to get those pipelines built, and he needs to, So, anyways, there was another issue I wanted to, because I didn't really want to do a video, but there was the Paul Krugman column in the New York Times that inspired me about fraudulent politicians. Oh yeah, the last point. Like yesterday and earlier this week, yesterday we saw Bill Clinton, former President Bill Clinton, confront the Black Lives Movement in Philadelphia. And it was a really intense exchange, and I really enjoyed that exchange. And he's people are somewhat critical of, like, well, he was too critical of them, but no, he was right. These people interrupted this rally. Protests are good. Bill Clinton was a protester. I was a protester. It's all good, but he challenged them it's going back to substance versus rhetoric. He challenged them. Yeah, and his crime bill did lead to, large incarcerations of a lot of African Americans, no question. And I think him and Hillary both agree that there were unintended consequences, bad consequences. But crime did go down. Gun violence went down. There were a lot of good things that came out of that. He challenged the Black Lives Movement. They didn't want to hear it, and I thought it was a great exchange, actually. But sometimes you can't reason with people. And Black Lives Movement is important, okay? Absolutely. The lives of a lot of Black people in the United States and even in Canada is not great. But you know what? Base your protest on intellectualism, on facts, okay? The crime bill had the U.S. crime bill in 1994, the one that Bill Clinton brought in, had its problems, and it did lead to larger incarcerations of African Americans. And even in hindsight, a lot of people, okay, it needed to be fixed. It wasn't all that great, but it did. Bill Clinton was right. It did lead to a lot of less violence in the African American community, and it was supported by a lot of people in the African American community and a lot of the Black Congressional Caucus, and I just thought, you know what? Earlier in the week in Toronto too, they came out and confronted Kathleen Wynne, and they were nasty to her. And I thought, you know what? It's sort of like who are these people? Like, it sort of reminds me of the Occupy Wall Street movement. They have franchises everywhere, even in Canada, and sometimes it's hard to take them seriously. When politicians are willing to engage you, and then you treat them like dirt. And yeah, these are serious issues. There's still a lot of discrimination against the Black community in the United States, Canada, elsewhere in the world. A lot of racism out there. But so I'm just saying, I have to admit, Bill Clinton's come under criticism for that harsh exchange, but I supported him on that one. I think it was intense. It was good. And it kind of was a really healthy debate, I think. So, and I don't think he has to apologize. And hindsight, that bill there were some problems with it. But again, it's about facts, right? Just the facts, ma'am. Just the facts, not the rhetoric. Not, I believe in facts, and not fraud. I'm tired of platitudes, and I'm tired of fraudulent statements, whether they come from Bernie Sanders about Wall Street or all this, the platitudes of Justin Trudeau. Because let's see some progress here, and John Tory, who's all about the photo op, and I don't see a lot of progress in our city, particularly in transit. So that's it. And if you have a chance to read Paul Krugman's piece in today's New York Times, read it. It's very good. And generally, he would be a Bernie Sanders supporter. He's left of center, and but he was very critical, and that's a good column today. So we were planning to do a video tonight, but I'm glad I got that off my chest, actually.
So well done one anyway.
So yeah. Anyways, I'm just gonna have a beer here with Cleve, and I'm gonna jump on the streetcar and go home.
And let's cure cancer.
Yeah, let's do that too.